Representative Kinner,
Here.
Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Schwartz, Representative Simpson, Representative Stith,
Excused.
Representative Walters,
Here.
and Chairman is floating around. There he is.
One oh six. Let's do 106. Second. And he's made a few changes as well, but I haven't got them all typed in yet.
That's something we can consider on those, Mr. Chairman, on the floor.
Depends if you want to do it right or if you want to do it fast.
We want to do it right fast.
So my inclination is to maybe sit down at, what are we doing at noon? So what I'd like to do is sit down and have a working group with whoever of you want to be part of it and finish working it up. And then we'll bring it up as soon as we're done with it and get it completed. We'll confirm or call back this committee and kick it out once we get a draft complete. Does that work for you? You available at noon? And a couple things. There was an auditing component to it at one time that has been taken out because the state auditor was going to review. I think Patrick wants that put back in. So if you want to work on some language for that, to bring that language to it. On the funding source, if you could add in a provision that allows two things. One that appropriates up to $250,000 from special revenues from the treasurer's office, basically from income earned. There has to be we have to make sure that and it'll be a loan to the entity, to the trust account, the holding account, that will be paid back with the initial proceeds of earnings from the account, but also well, just have that kind of drafted up. I've got a rough set. I just got a kind of key point outlines on it. I'll be working on them as well. We'll start it. I know, but we went through what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 months. Yeah, but we had general fund. I wanted. The more I thought about it, I think special revenue will work better. But it's a loan, not a direct appropriation that'll be paid back to the special revenue account. And then the question was on the auditing component. In addition to having the auditor review the funding and the transactions, obviously then we'll need the ability to do an independent audit on some type of a 2 or 3 times a year basis where the audit comes in and just an independent auditor comes in and reviews it. That would be an outside third party auditing it. I'd be surprised if they can get this thing up and running well without 1 or 2 consultants to put it all together. So we want to make sure they have the ability to retain a consultant. And if $250,000 is not enough, then well, the initial loan would be up to $250,000, and then the ability to review, to hire those consultants, and make additional borrowing from the trust with the agreement of somebody. So I'm thinking that there ought to be a board for this thing. Would be the CFO, the CFO, the state auditor, and 1 or 2, and a chief executive and a legislator. will kind of sit as a supervisory board to oversee it. So, so we've got some transparency on how and when it's operating. And they'll report on a regular basis while during the startup process. So at least, but no less than once a month, the treasurer will report to this board, you know, so we can follow where it's going, how fast it's moving, and that type of thing. So I've got another little list that I'll send out an email to you we'll start feeding into this and we can start circulating the stuff through the morning. All right. So the goal will be that we'll have this thing kicked out by the end of the day. Go ahead. Just no, it will be during the stand-up phase, but then that board will, after it's stood up. So this is going to take hopefully less than 4 to 6 months to get going. And then the other component that we'll put in is a final report before it kicks off, where that board and the treasurer will come and present to appropriations to kind of put everybody on track of where we're at and what we're doing. And how and when it's going to launch and how it's going to launch. So in the next 3 or 4 months, the whole package we put together. And then before we ring the bell and sell the first token, we'll and maybe even do some type of a test run on it, but at some fashion or another, it'll come back and report to the JAC. So we know and have a report of everything that was done, who was hired, all that kind of stuff. How is it going to be housed? Review the rules and regulations and see and make sure that they are consistent with what we asked for. And then we'll launch it off. And it could be CapFin. It doesn't have to be JAC. Either one would work. Okay.
Audit you reference, you know, that I think the market for that, from what I've been told, is actually relatively inexpensive. It's probably a 900 series for like $15,000-$20,000. Honestly, it's very inexpensive to do those code-based audits.
Yeah, Patrick said there's already a bunch of folks out there that can do it.
So yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
Sit down with you.
Okay.
Email us what you've got so far. Okay.
Yep. As soon as I finish typing it all in, it's hand notes from Patrick, and I've got it half of it typed up. Okay. What's next? You got it? Excellent.
We'll get copies.
Thank you.
Maybe, Mary Lane, maybe by. Okay, I think we're gonna tackle
block is our construction projects in our new development account 1 program. And these are typically municipal projects. And we've got 6 of them this year. And those equate to $6,730,640. I would like to point out that projects, if you look in that blue sheet on the far left, so it'd be tab E, F, G, and H, the 4 municipal projects we have. There was an amendment that was brought by Senate Appropriations on those 4 that would require them, if they were eligible for ARPA direct funds, to use that funding first before it came to account 1, or before they used account 1 funding. We've been working with the state budget office's ARPA direct expert to figure out and get some guidance on criteria and the potential to match federal to federal dollars. We're still working through that. It's a little difficult to decipher federal guidelines sometimes. So there may be a few concerns on possibly the Crystal Bypass Pipeline in the Northwest Rural. And I think we have representatives from those 2 projects that might like to provide public testimony here in a minute. But so moving on to block 2, rehabilitation, that's our account 2 projects. We've got 9 projects within that block that equate to $17,702,910. I would point out in the far right-hand column, there are 5 projects that if you see note 2, they're contingent upon the transfer of funds from our account 1 to our account 2, which is just moving funds from new development to rehabilitation to cover those costs. And then the last block of projects are just amendments to existing projects. Most of them are time amendments. There's a couple of funding amendments as well. The time amendments are typically associated with delays in receiving easements. So with that, I would open it up to questions if you have any specific questions.
Mr. Chairman. So question I have is I got looking through there, for example, you a lot of these you have language in there that says that that they're going to have to come up with a percentage from other sources and others you don't. And I'm curious why that requirement's not kind of across the board. You know, you look at, I looked at a couple of those that, you know, either up to 30% or 28% have to come from 70% of this project is from other sources, but on your special conditions. And then you get, for example, to the Goshen project, and it's funded either with grants or loans 100%. And I'm trying to understand why that is.
Mr. Chairman, our typical grant loan is 67% grant, and then the option for a 33% loan. Some sponsors elect to take that loan if they don't have the operating budget to cover it. Some do have the operating budget to cover it, so they just provide that match on their own. Some of these ones that are unique, such as the 30% grant for Deaver, they have a reclamation grant, Wyoming or water energy and efficiency grant through the federal government. Therefore, that's being used as match for our program. And then similar, Goshen is, the tunnels are very unique. 49% of the lands that the tunnels, if you know all that, I won't get into it, but
Into Nebraska.
basically half and half. And so, but Goshen is required to operate and maintain, and then they're reimbursed by Nebraska. So the intent would be to provide that funding to Goshen, but keep those loans separate so it's easier to track. If you want me to get into the details, I can, but it's a little confusing.
I'm listening.
Okay. So again, 49.51, 49 is Wyoming 51. So the 49% of the cost would be at a 67% grant, 33% loan. That's really what benefits the Wyoming side, Goshen Irrigation District. The 51% is really what benefits the Nebraska side. But like I mentioned, Goshen's contract, I believe with reclamation, requires them to really take care of that. So that 51% for really that benefits Nebraska is all loan. So then Nebraska will be required to reimburse Goshen for that loan. So we're not going to be essentially granting Nebraska anything. We'll be making money on our money by loaning Goshen for Nebraska, if you're following the trail there.
But my question is why doesn't Nebraska, because you're tying up money for this loan, why doesn't Nebraska get the loan and give it to Goshen to take care of their part of it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think they are working on that. And at the November meeting with Select Water and Water Development Commission, I think the decision was made to get it in place. If we don't have to spend it, we won't, but to not hold the project up. So if Nebraska comes and finds their funding, then we wouldn't have to provide that loan and we could revert that funding.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my memory says that when we get to the floor and we start talking about cloud seeding, we always have some questions about the efficiency of that or how well it works. Could you just remind me if there's like it improves the snowpack by 15% or whatever percentage that might be? I think there's some number out there. Maybe someone could help me with that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to let Barry Lawrence, our Deputy Director of Planning, to talk to that.
Cool. Yeah, just brief, just a real quick.
Yes, our research study back that ended in 2014 showed 5 to 15% increase in the efficiency of the snowfall. In other words, a little bit of increase in that snowfall, but then that has to translate to snowpack and then obviously to runoff and so forth. So one of the things that we have in the planning bill, which you already saw, was to look at our last 4 years of actual operations, because we're not in research, we're in operations. And to assess exactly what additional bang for the buck we're getting.
Okay, good. Thank you.
so if, Mr. Chairman, if I may, can I go back to this Goshen one? I'm a little hung up there, and and where I'm hung up here a little bit is we're providing a grant in one part for 290,000, I believe, for materials, and then we get to the tunnel component of it. We have an overall project cost of 2.3 million, and we do that with a grant of 771, and then we have a loan of 379. And then we have another loan of 1.198. So I'm going to assume that the 1.1 is the Nebraska loan. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes, the 1.198,500 is the 51% Nebraska's, but the loan is actually to Goshen. I just want to make sure that you're not, the Goshen Irrigation District 29.4 pipeline project, the materials only, that's a separate project.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I guess I'm just, Mr. Chairman, just a little hung up and wondering why because we're fronting the money for Nebraska irrigators on this repair, and just kind of a question of why we don't make them belly up to the bar before we start that project. I'm sure you've kind of had that. I think you explained that to me, and it's just different approach to it, but I'm not sure that I agree.
So typically, what's the timing for the back, to get paid back?
Mr. Chairman, our
20 years.
program really goes from 10 years to 50 years, not to exceed the life of the project itself. This one, I believe, is 20-year payback on the loan.
But typically, how soon does Nebraska begin to pay back the loan?
Mr. Chairman, Goshen Irrigation District would be responsible for paying back that loan. They'll have to have an agreement between themselves for Nebraska to pay Goshen. But that would become due the first year after substantial completion of the project. I should say in this particular one, this is just for design. So it would come due basically when design is complete. Or if the project, that's
What's the estimated cost of the project?
I believe the last estimate was around 45 million total project cost.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
there's another bill, Senate File 82, that actually appropriates $24 million I remember $22 million for the construction portion of the work.
Yes, there is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further questions? Representative Simpson, any comments?
No, I think that this construction omnibus bill is very straightforward. It's really similar to the projects we approve every year. All these projects have been vetted and carefully analyzed.
Okay, any more public comment?
Mr. Chairman, if I could
Please.
just, one more thing, and then I'm sure a couple of the sponsors would like to comment. If you go to page 6 of the bill, I'm sorry, 7, and down to line 21, that's where the amendment from Senate Appropriations starts. And it starts by saying if the project is eligible for funding pursuant to more or less ARPA and what I've already mentioned. So we're a little unclear on whether or not if these sponsors are going to the SRF program, for example, for their 33% portion of the project, whether or not if that could be matched or co-funded with the ARPA direct dollars. And if it can't, that causes a problem because you can't match federal to federal sometimes. So as long as that is interpreted as that eligible piece would be interpreted as if the sponsor comes with federal matching dollars for that ARPA and it's not determined that that can be the case, that would be indeed ineligible. Not that just the project is eligible because it's a storage tank or a transmission line. So I think that is one of the questions. So just.
Who have you been working with in the Chief Executive's office?
Mr. Chairman, we're working with the budget department with their consultant that they have on board.
And it won't match.
As well as we've had some follow-up conversations with folks over in the SRF program and kind of see.
Yeah, some allow federal matches and some don't.
Yeah, and it's a little difficult to decipher. So anyway, thank you.
Okay, close public comment, motion on the bill.
I think they did have some.
Oh, comment, all right, come on.
I apologize for not standing up sooner. Mr. Chairman, I'm Frank Strong. I'm with the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. We have no objection to this bill. Our one concern is we are currently applying for drinking water SRF funding for our 33% match. And as Jason mentioned, the possibility of us not being able to use those funds for matching, we want that to make it where the project's ineligible for the ARP funding and it could revert back to the traditional account 1 funding. I think that's our only concern that we have.
So your concern is that the money will revert back and you won't be able to move forward with the project?
So if we're currently, and we've gone through the process, we're applying for drinking water SRF funds. If it gets determined that we can't use those drinking water SRF funds to match the ARP funds, we can't move forward on the projects. We won't have another funding source. So in the event that we receive the drinking water SRF funding and it's determined that we can't use that as the match for the ARP funding, we would hope that the project could continue to be funded by traditional account 1.
And is that what the statute provides?
And I took it that that's what you said, that you've got it funded in one. But if it applied for ARPA, so be it. And if not, then we've got plan B.
Mr. Chairman, that's what the amendment says. It's just a matter, I'm not an attorney to be able to read the language and exactly come to a firm conclusion that his situation would be considered ineligible the way the amendment's written.
Take us to the page.
So again, page 7, line 21. And about halfway through that sentence, it says if the project is eligible for, and then you can read down from there.
I think that, Mr. Chairman, the way I read it, it says that you have to use the ARPA funds if it's eligible. You have to use those before you can use any water development 1. And then if ARPA wasn't
eligible, then you do water development.
Mr. Chairman. That's what it says, but I think the fear is that, yes, okay, now it's ARPA eligible. So they go out and use ARPA dollars, but then it puts Cheyenne in a pinch because Cheyenne for their 33% share is using SRF dollars. And so if they're using, so that, which is other federal dollars. And so then by the state using ARPA direct dollars, then it makes Cheyenne, puts Cheyenne at a disadvantage because Cheyenne is unable to come up with their third due to where they're going to get their
Due to
third.
their matching.
Yes, that's the concern. And so
You
then.
got that, is that right? Is he the smart guy?
That is correct.
So, Mr. Chairman, if it was considered as a package when they come in the door, yes, it might be eligible because it's a water project that typically SRF does. But they're coming in the door with that SRF funding as the 33% match, that it be considered as a package. And because of that funding, then it's not eligible for the ARPA. If that would be the interpretation when they consider eligibility, then they're probably okay. Because at that point, they would say, well, you can't match that, so it wouldn't be eligible.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I believe when we start working the bill, I have an amendment that'll resolve this problem for Cheyenne.
And Mr. Chairman, the other point I'd real quickly like to make would be when Senate Appropriations brought this amendment, they were concerned that it not delay any projects because of this. We're a little uncertain. We probably have to put together some different agreement templates because of the federal piece of it, which is going to take a little time. All these projects would typically be approved at our March meeting here 2 weeks from now. And so that would delay it for a couple months. And I'm not sure if we have our other public comment. Maybe raise their hand yet or not.
Well, but I don't know if we can do this, Mr. Chairman, if we can do that, there may be some delays. And so the Senate amendment doesn't address that delay, does it?
Mr. Chairman, no, they just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to delay any projects. And
But there's no language that requires that it not be delayed.
That's correct.
He just said, do your best.
That's correct.
There you go.
Okay.
Good job.
There we go. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rutherford. He's somewhere floating around.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and representatives. Tony Rutherford, Northwest Rural Water District in Cody, Wyoming. I would just echo the comments made by the city of Cheyenne. We are in a similar position with our project where I have applied for an MRG grant in the percentage of 25 with the proposal for our district to pick up 8% of the project costs out of our operating budget. If that MRG grant is not approved by the SLIB board, we would then be in the same position as Cheyenne with the intention of securing an SRF loan. Also, as Jason mentioned, a lot of the uncertainty around what's required, what's not required with ARPA direct funding for these projects concerns us that the project could be delayed. We're certainly not in opposition to the bill. We're very grateful for the water development program in particular and the legislature, but we just have some concern that with the uncertainty, we might be delayed with the project and then potentially end up in a similar boat as Cheyenne.
Okay, I appreciate your testimony. Well, I mean, obviously the key will be to getting the application with the ARPA dollars moving as quickly as possible so that if you run into a loggerhead, you can fix it. Have an opportunity to fix it before spring. That's the problem with free money. It's not free. Always. Okay, any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Now, motion on the bill.
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Walters, second by Representative Simpson. Amendments? Comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, if you got an amendment, I'd do it now. It's easier.
I'm sensitive to Cheyenne and Northwest dilemma. I think we could potentially put them in a bind. And so I'd like to move that this was a Senate amendment that picked up those 4 projects and made them all slide into ARPA if possible. I'd like to move that we amend that amendment and strike the wording for Crystal Bypass Pipeline and Northwest Rural Water System projects and just let them continue as is, and not put this restriction on them that they're being forced to slide across. So, okay. So I haven't found it on the page.
So
The Senate amendment
It's on page-
pertains to 4 projects. It's located 4 different places in the bill. And I would suggest that we undo the 2 that we've talked about and just back them back out so that the Senate language disappears on those 2 projects.
So my question is, why wouldn't the other 2 projects have the same problem?
They visited with the other 2 and the other 2 have alternative funding plans, and so it won't affect them either way.
Would you repeat the 2 that you're taking out?
Mr. Chairman, Crystal Bypass, which is tab E, and Northwest Rural Water, which is tab H.
So the next question on that would be, Evan, is there, all we have is a delay. We don't have, because if they don't qualify, then they've got to figure another way to get from A to B. And merely because there's a risk of being delayed, there is a real benefit of using the ARPA dollars because it leaves more money available for more projects. And there's a good likelihood there's not going to be any ARPA money left, or very much, which means it won't land on water projects. So is that a reasonable risk you want to take?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with you. I doubt that they're going to end up in ARPA, but if they did, I hate to put these 2 projects at a problem where they have challenges with their matching loan portion.
Mr. Chairman, what if on those 2 projects, we didn't require the match, that we let the ARPA dollars pay the entirety of the project?
Mr. Chairman, that would be inconsistent with all the rest of the projects that are forced a contribution. I think to grant those 2 100% grant would be inconsistent and it wouldn't be fair to the other participants.
Mr. Chairman, personally, I would prefer to be inconsistent and use the ARPA to fund the entirety of the project and get more projects out on the ground by saving our water dollars. But that's my 2 cents.
How much are the 2 ARPA loans? My other question is there not a mechanism to get reimbursed so that if we front load or loan the money separately, and then so cover a loan to the project so that it moves forward timely, but then can be reimbursed by ARPA dollars?
Mr. Chairman, we could certainly do that. The loan is always available to the sponsors. This bill doesn't provide for that though, so we'd have to write in full languages to appropriating that loan, which would probably be more work than what it's worth.
So, Mr. Chairman and Representative Simpson, Crystal starts on page 6, and the reference to the ARPA project starts on page 7 on line 21. And you're saying remove that reference to the ARPA requirements in that one, and then the Northwest projects would appear on page 14, line 11 is where we start that reference if the project is eligible. Are you saying just pull that reference to the ARPA out of those 2 sections?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. That language in 2 sections that we just strike out.
And the Northwest project is referenced under Project G, and the Crystal project is referenced under Project D, as in dog. That, if you want to, is that a motion you're wanting to do now, or?
That is my motion, Mr. Chairman. I don't believe I received a second, however.
So my question is, the consultants that the budget folks have retained should be able to answer this fairly quickly. I don't know why it's, when was it presented to them? Do we know?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that was Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Yeah. And they have provided information back to us. It's referencing different sections of guidelines and bills and laws, and it's a bit of a circular reference if you've ever looked through that kind of stuff.
Have you spoken to them?
We plan to follow up with them to try to get some more direct answers. And it's a matter of how we interpret it, they interpret it, and then getting some feedback from SRF, and they think something a little different. And I don't know if anybody's an expert on this at this point.
So I'm just curious, do we have a total with all the Senate and House amendments on what ARPA money remains, if any? I was hoping for a different number.
So Evan, I'm wondering if we, if it makes more sense to bring this as like a second or third amendment reading, and then we'll get in touch with the budget authorities. Have them come up and address this for us, like this afternoon. We'll just bring Kevin up here.
That's fair enough. I'd
we
be
get this
glad
thing
to
addressed.
withdraw my amendment and deal with it on the floor. That'd be fine.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So I think we get the message, and we'll ensure that we don't throw you in jeopardy there. We just want to clarify our ability.
So, so with that regards, does someone want to work with Kevin, have him come up here and we can, would you do that? In either at noon or adjournment,
Okay.
whatever works, come up and let's have him walk through it with us. And then if necessary, we can get that CLA person on the line. So we have a better understanding of it.
Will do.
It's frog.
Pretty nice.
Okay. Let's do that.
So,
Yeah, let's kick it out.
yeah, okay,
And then Evan can,
move the bill.
roll call, please.
Representative Kinner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz.
Well,
Representative,
Go ahead. But so the concept is, we just want to make sure, just because someone had concerns, that's one thing, but we want to have a better, more solid grip on the issue before we give up on the ARPA dollars. Yep.
So,
Oh.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. And so you'll approve the bill, and then depending on what you find out at noon, it'll either come on a second or third reading amendment.
Or even committee of the whole.
Okay,
We could do it today if we find out.
okay. Sounds good. And we'll plan to be back at noon then, just in case you have questions for us.
Evan, you could probably send Kevin an email right now
Okay.
saying that this is the issue. We'd like a response ASAP, and we'd like you to come up, and you or someone in the office come up and talk to us about it.
Will do.
Okay,
Representative Simpson,
Aye.
Representative Stiff left an aye vote. Representative Walters. Chairman Nicholas.
hi.
So it's an all aye do pass, no amendments.
Typically, it's 110. So apparently, the Dems have a problem with this primarily. This is 90. This is,
Yours and Hicks.
and the problem is that has to do with the number of Democrats on the committee. We can just put that language back in. It's a 7-member, so we'd have.
Members, this bill is brought by Senator Hicks and Chairman Nicholas, and it refers to cap fin. And the intent here, because of the work that takes place in capital fin and the education for the body as a whole, to increase the number on each side, the House and the Senate, by 1 person. And then you'll see some language in there at the bottom on page 2 on line 6, where they've deleted some language there, provided that not more than 5 members appointed each presiding officer shall be from the same political party. I think we've got an amendment to adjust that a little bit. But that's the intent of the bill. And so do we have a motion on the bill?
Public comment on the bill?
Public comment on the bill. That's what I meant. Motion,
Close public comment.
close public comment.
The bill. 90.
It's 90 and it's been moved by Walter, second by Kinner. Discussion on the bill,
Mr. Chairman,
please, Representative.
so
Schwartz.
I've got a concern with page 2, lines 3 through 6 in the stricken language. It's reminiscent. Pardon?
Yep, go ahead and voice your concerns.
Well, it's reminiscent of what happened on management counts. And I can foresee a situation where it is not good for the minority party.
So, Mr. Chairman, I agree with the comments just made. And while I don't have the language worked up perfectly, I would propose that the end of line 6, or about where the stricken language starts, we would add new language that says not less than 1 member from a minority party would be appointed.
So they could second, and then let me ask a question. So depending on the leadership, they could appoint more, but it has to be at least 1.
And my concern with just Mr. Chairman, if I may, my
Please.
concern with just putting the stricken language back in is that under our current elected delegations on our Senate colleagues, it would require both members to be on this committee, and they may not have the time capacity for that. And so I don't want to over obligate them, and not saying that that would always be the case, but trying to I fully agree with the concern, and so trying to make sure that we address that concern.
So if I make, I think we need.
Please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vice Chairman. May I?
Would you?
Thank you.
No, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have butter in my ears. I couldn't hear that last part. I think we might need a notwithstanding in there. That because if you follow my drift, when you work on the language, just let's work on the language. Aside later.
Conceptual amendment would be one person from a minority party.
That would be the minimum, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, as long as it is clear that is the minimum.
So Mary Lee? The intent of this is that there is a requirement of at least one member being from the minority party, and we'll let Representative Walters and Representative Schwartz tweak that out. Are the rest of you comfortable? Representative Simpson?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's overly compensated in the previous sentence. Appointments shall be as nearly as possible a percentage of the elected membership of minority and majority parties. That sentence in and of itself eliminates the possibility there would never be a minority party appointed, and is likely to be at least two, given this current population. So I think it's covered. I think that's why they took out that last sentence, is because the previous sentence was more than adequate. I would push back on that, because it would then prohibit if the percentage only allowed for one, and yet there was perhaps two highly qualified members of the minority party who would be appropriate to put on the committee. This wouldn't allow for it. Mr. Chairman,
Please.
but by doing the nevertheless, all you're doing is just saying there's going to be a minimum of one, which doesn't help that situation at all anyway.
So let's work that out a little bit, because Representative Simpson, if I understand what you're saying there, even if we add that you have to have a minimum one based on the majority minority party percentage, that could prohibit them adding an additional minority party if they wanted.
It certainly would, Mr. Vice Chairman. Yeah, I think it could actually hurt you instead of help.
Yeah.
So we could put in language that just simplify, say the Senate will have at least one and the House will have at least two delegates. That fixes it, basically.
Mr. Chairman, I think Representative Simpson's point is, why does it need to be fixed? If you're saying that it's going to be proportional to the percentage, why do you need to say anything more?
Well, I think the point there is it shall be reflected nearly as possible. The shall being the important part of it, is if you had you had additional qualified people in the minority party that the leadership wanted to have be on that committee, they couldn't, because it has to reflect proportionately.
Mr. Chairman, and maybe the problem to solve is, what if the proportion is, what if the proportion is, well, I don't know. I guess I goes with Representative Simpson. I don't think that, let's imagine that there are three really good minority party members that you want on this committee. The current, you'd really have to change this language a lot to allow that. You'd have to change the unamended part.
Okay, Counselor, what's your suggestion?
Mr. Chairman, I think the existing language is fine.
Well, I think that there's some validity in the point there that if it says you shall reflect nearly as possible the percentage of elected membership, and use the Senate as an example, where they only have two Democrats, and so percentage, the most they could have on is one, correct? But if the president of the Senate wanted to have two, this would prohibit it. Right?
We could change that so that last line said, provided no more than 5 members appointed by the House can be from the same political party. That way you're guaranteed to.
I guess I consider CapFin to be a nonpartisan committee. And I'm really concerned that we want to get the most qualified members of the body onto that committee. The discussions, the discussions we're having right now, talking about the endowment fund, we want qualified people. And
How could it be how could it be a non-political party when the statute already has this language in it?
I understand that, but I'm just saying, why do we need to put the language in here that restricts that membership? Anyhow, I've registered my complaint. And if Representative Walters and I can work on language, I would appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, well, look at this language, if you would, starting on line 3 with the new sentence, starting with appointments. Appointments to the committee shall be made by each presiding officer, period. Delete the rest of the language.
Mr. Chairman, that provides extra flexibility, sure, because then there's not a partisan component to it at all.
No, I think there is. I think that language would allow 0 of the minority party, possibly.
I think that I agree. Now that I think about it, so if you had a leader that says, I'm not going to have any minority in there, that would prohibit. Well, so shall be made by each presiding officer with a minimum of 1 minority member on each side.
You could, yeah, Mr. Chairman, yes, you could combine Walter's amendment with yours and say appointment to the committee by each presiding officer shall be
With at least, what's the right word there?
I think the phrase you want is provided, however, that not less than 1 member shall be from
Say that
each
again.
party.
Say that again, please. I'd like to. By presiding officer.
Provided, however, that not less than 1 member of the committee shall be from the minority party. From each body.
May I offer?
Then what if you have libertarians, I suppose?
Okay.
What I would say is appointment to the committee by each providing officer shall reflect no less than the minimum of the percentage of the elected membership of the majority and minority parties.
That works. Yeah.
No,
Say it again.
no less than the minimum of the percentage. And that's not going to work because then we get to less than 1. Well, but then what if the minority party is 20 people?
If we leave it as is and have less than 1, it solves that. So then if you're guaranteed 1, then if the percentage goes up.
Mr. Chairman, because then we have our
Let's-
libertarians.
let's-
Mr. Chairman, the problem, the not less than language creates the problem that if you've got 3 parties in the House.
Not
And-
less than 1 from a minority party.
Not less than 1 from at least 1 minority party.
From A. Not each, from A.
Okay. That could work.
Hey, somebody say it.
So I think we say we can say, 2 things. This says the presiding officer picks them. I don't think that's what we've done in the past. I think the speakers would pick them.
That's the presiding officer.
Mhm.
Speaker and the president.
They're both honorary members.
No, they pick
They're the presiding officer of the.
of
House
each,
and
of
Senate.
each house. Picks. So that's what we've been doing. That's.
So why don't we say there's a minimum of 1 in the Senate, 2 in the House, and any additional ones based upon population. The way you get your population.
So that's leave the existing language and say not less than 1 from the Senate and 2 from the House. We'll tell you when we get it higher.
That should do it, right? That's about as close as we can get.
I'm looking at the shall, and maybe the shall's the problem. What if it just said should reflect,
May.
may reflect? And that way there's the flexibility.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
So if we change the shall to may, but then do we come up with the same problem, and then we leave and where do we end the sentence?
Then
But not less than 1.
after House.
We could
instead of-
we could strike as nearly as possible. That's stupid.
There are a myriad ways to skin this cat, I suppose. But one way to do it might be to put it into the active voice instead of a passive
But
voice.
the may then doesn't require, I'm sorry, go ahead, Clark.
So it would read, if you put it in the sentence in the active voice, you delete the sentence on line 3, starting with appointments. You just delete that completely and you replace it with the presiding officers shall appoint members to the committee from their respective houses, provided, however, that not less than 1 member shall be from a minority party. From each
I like
house,
that.
from not less
But
than 1
let's
member
split
from
less
each,
than 1 in the House, 1 from the Senate, and 2 from the.
provided, however, that not less than 1 member from each house shall be from a minority party. Does that work?
Works for me.
Provided, however, that not less than 1 member in the House of
So they could
Representatives,
have.
or 2 members in the House of Representatives, 1 member in
Even
the
when you have 2
Senate.
Yeah, but they could. He could
Oh,
appoint-
so you want to have 2?
Well, that's what Bob's saying.
I think you could leave it 1. It still gives them the ability to have more than 1.
I think it's simpler if you say, provided, however, that not less than 1 member from each house shall be from a minority party,
Yeah.
right?
We're trying to make this work for you, Andy.
I know, I'm thinking,
Okay,
I mean, fundamentally, right now, I'm the only minority party member on the House side.
No. Well, on that committee,
Yeah, on that committee.
but we could have multiple if he elected, and it could be from,
Yeah,
we've got independents, libertarians, and Democrats.
yeah, I think this, for right now, this is okay. If I want to make a change in second reading or third.
Are we supposed to meet with these guys?
We're supposed to meet at 9?
No, so they're doing Senate confirmation hearings at 9.
That's right.
Okay, shoot.
For right now, that's fine.
Okay. Is everybody okay with, that's a great amendment. Representative Walters.
withdraw my amendment. On the fifth.
Fifth Amendment is at the top of the page.
So it's Stiff and Walters.
Yes.
Some people can do language.
Yes, working on that.
Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Roll call as amended.
question on the bill. Roll call, please, Mary Lee.
Oh, dear me.
Thanks, Clark. Thanks, Andy.
Representative Kinner,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz,
Aye.
Representative Simpson, Representative Stiff,
Aye.
Representative Walters, Chairman Nicholas,
Aye.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Aye.
All ayes do pass as a.
What's the,
Codifying institutional land fund, Senate File 73.
which one's 112? Yeah, that's reports.
Does that sound-
We don't have to kick out reports yet. What we need to do is sit down and look at the Senate's version, look at our version, cross pollinate them and see if there's anything else we want to put in.
Let's go to 73. We'll take up
Wait,
Senate
let-
File 73,
What is it?
management of institutional land fund, I think. We have anybody here from Management Audit Committee? Welcome. If you'd like to. Is anybody familiar with this bill and what it is they're trying to accomplish?
I think it's just a cleanup, from my understanding. Let's just kick it out and we'll let them just clean it on the floor.
Okay, motion on the bill,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
second by Kenner.
I'm sorry, we were talking.
Oh.
I had to read it 3 times, but
I didn't have that. So this legislation codifies institutional land revenue fund as well as directs the state treasurer to invest these funds and deposit the earnings to the general fund. The balance was approximately 2.1 million on January 5th and would be invested in the state agency pool. Oh, you know what they're doing. So they're combining these, so you've got the state lands that are dedicated to corrections, to the state hospital, to the Life Resource Center, and they've kept those separately. And they're going to invest them, commingle, invest them, but keep the like accounted separately. Yeah. The way I'm reading this. Funds in the account attributable to each individual department shall not be commingled. And the treasurer shall invest the funds within the fund and shall deposit the earnings from. An improved investment tool. We have a motion on, did we move it? Second question on the bill? We're on 73. We're ready for a roll call on it. No.
I thought you were doing. Representative Kinner,
Aye.
Representative Schwartz, Representative Simpson,
hi,
Representative Stiff, Representative Walters, Chairman Nicholas, Vice Chairman Larson.
Aye.
All ayes do pass.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take the assignment to find somebody from Management Audit Committee to run this. And then the only bill, Mary Lee, we have left is 112, Senate File 112.
Yes, what is your pleasure?
We're going to hold that. Could we ask you to compare Senate House Bill 146 and Senate File 112?
That's in your folder. I already highlighted the comparison. Yes.
I've got them both, but the question that I was going to ask you, do they both have the same? I had you compare with ARPA, but are the rest of the reports in there the same? Are they identical?
I have to go back and relook.
Would you mind looking at that, and then we'll determine if we need to amend Senate File 112 when we meet again.
146 and
Right.
112. Okay.
We just need to make sure that there are no other reports that have been evolving or that we want to have. Because actually, it'd be nice to put this footnote, this report. And get it out. That would go a long way, I think, towards solving the problem. So we'll do that, and then we'll have this discussion with the Senate when we're doing
I
that.
think that's a great idea.
We'll do it when?
We're going to meet with them sometime today, because we'll do JCC, and then we'll probably have some other meeting with them.
So Mary Lee, I think what we're asking you to do is find the differences between House Bill 148 and Senate File 112, if there are any. we're going to hold Senate File 112 because we may want to include another report in it as an amendment when we review it, depending on what our conversation in the conference committee on the budget does.
Okay, I have a couple other questions. The water bill, Senate File 80, yes, Senate File 80 was amended. So my question is, can I go ahead and write the standing committee report and turn it in? Because you did vote on it, but you're still coming back at noon to talk about it.
Mr. Chairman, we did not amend House or Senate File 80.
Wait a minute.
We're going
Going
to,
to amend it.
we're going to talk about it and have a potential amendment on the floor.
Correct.
So you're good to go.
Okay, that's where I got confused. I can go ahead and turn that SCR in. That's where I wasn't sure.
Okay,